Welcome back to the second part of Murder with Friends. In part one, we outlined the early life of Richard Ramirez and how he found his way to Los Angeles in the 1980s. Now, where you're picking up with us, it's when he descended into murder. It's 1984. Richard Ramirez has, what did you say, $1,000 a day drug habit?
It was like, yeah, it was like cocaine. He'd been doing cocaine with his cousin.
He was doing cocaine intravenously. A pretty insane drug habit. He's not in a great place. He is getting by through stealing, petty theft. It's just how he's sort of come to understand life, even at this young age of in his 20s.
Yeah.
And the first murder that he would commit actually took place in San Francisco. He's a drifter, so he goes between Los Angeles, San Francisco, but all the murders took place within California.
Yeah.
The first murder takes place April 10th, 1984. This is 9-year-old May. A really gruesome murder here, and also a murder that seems sort of directly from the lessons that his cousin had taught him. This is she's raped, she is sexually assaulted, she's strung up on a pole. It's absolutely brutal, and yet we don't see him murder again until June 28th, 1984. So he goes from April to June.
That we know of, even.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because they didn't link that murder to him until like the 2000s when they had a DNA match. So previous to that, they had thought that his first murder was in 1984 of this, was 70, like the elderly woman.
Yeah, this was 79-year-old Jeannie Vincow in Los Angeles County. And so we're going chronologically, but that's true. That's a great point to bring up, is that this murder of the 9-year-old, nobody knew was associated with Richard Ramirez because his confessions were all over the place, as we'll get into in part 3. That they didn't know it was him until DNA said that it absolutely was him. So then there's the murder of 79-year-old Jeannie Vincow. This takes place in Los Angeles.
Yeah, and just, he almost decapitates her. He stabs her multiple times. It's just so incredibly violent and gruesome. It's kind of like your worst nightmare. And it just, the way he chooses his victims is just like kind of at random. It's completely at random, just literally going around, and like he'd find a house that's like dimly lit with like an unlocked door, or go through like a window, lock your doors, turn on a light. Like, absolutely.
We talk about killers that that premeditate. So for example, Dennis Rader, BTK, these were serial killers that were stalking their victims. And while we call Richard Ramirez the Night Stalker, most of his killings were opportunistic. It's just that, a window happened to be open, that he was able to push through. A door happened to be unlocked, that you were just in the neighborhood where Richard Ramirez was that night. And there was it was so random that the entire city of Los Angeles and just the greater Los Angeles, California area got put on high alert because you just didn't know why and where he was going to be striking next.
Absolutely wrong place, wrong time. We were kind of talking about the woman who deflects the keys, he kills a roommate, and he goes out and he wants to kill more, and so he kills someone who's in a car who she stops because she thinks that she's being followed, and he tries to take her to the car, and then he ends up shooting her in the head.
Right, so this took place March 17th, 1985. It's a crazy, crazy night, and we were talking about it. It's sort of like this woman had magic keys. So he follows a woman into her garage. At the time, he's wearing an AC/DC cap that would eventually be recovered at the crime scene, and then they thought that AC/DC somehow influenced the murders. That's hogwash. They have nothing to do with it, but it was easy at the time for the media to pick that up. So the lights go out right as he's about to shoot this woman in her garage, but he has the gun just locked right on her head, so he thinks, I have a clear shot here. At that moment, she just tries to block it, deflect it. Her keys ricochet the bullet.
Unbelievable.
And she plays dead in the garage. So he thinks that she's dead. He goes upstairs, and then he eventually kills her roommate, 34-year-old Dale Okazaki, who was hiding. And then she just happened to peek up, and at that moment, he just shot her right in the head. I mean, it's incredibly terrifying, but he still wasn't gratified by that killing. So that same night, like you said, he follows a random Veronica Yu while she's driving. and she acts sort of boldly.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like her making that attempt to kind of be like, okay, I'm gonna go with my instinct. I feel something's wrong. I'm gonna try to like let this person pass me. And then like the worst case scenario happens, you know what I mean? He goes and he tries to take her out of the car. Like if I pull over to let someone pass me and I see them getting out of their car, I don't even know what I would do in that scenario. I'm a small person. I guess I would just try to lock my door. I don't even know what you do in that situation.
It's chilling. And you think of situations that perhaps you've been in where you have this uneasy feeling. I remember one time I was driving at night and this guy started flashing his lights at me, and he pulled over right beside me and he just started flashing what looked like a badge out the window and telling me to pull over, but it wasn't a cop car. And I just remember thinking, like, that's Richard fucking Ramirez. I'm not gonna pull over. And then he just sped off into the night. It was, but you think of situations like that.
But like he probably did that to someone else who maybe pulled over.
Right.
Yeah.
What we have is the account, the numerous accounts of the people that he murdered, the people that he assaulted, and we won't unfortunately be able to get into all of them because it was a total rampage. But there were probably a number of other people that came into contact with him that didn't know. That night, though, on March 17th, they get the first sort of description of him, and they can match it at this time. They can match the bullets so they know that it's the same person, the same gun at least, that is committing these crimes. They also were able to pull a thumbprint off of a screen at Jenny Vinkau's house. So they're working with something, but still law enforcement is having a hard time communicating with each other. This is still in the early days of the investigation. March 27th, so 10 days later, a totally bananas murder will occur at the residence of Vincent and Maxine Zazzara, 64-year-old and 44-year-old. So Vincent is just shot point blank while he's on the couch. He's dead, he's taken out. And then Maxine would be tied up, she would be sexually assaulted, and then while Richard is ransacking the house looking for something, looking for the belongings, because he was opportunistic also in the sense that he would rob the families that he was murdering. She then gets a shotgun and that they had at the house, which is really fortunate, bold that they had that. And the shotgun is empty because they'd emptied it out because their grandkids had been at the house the weekend prior. Richard is incensed when he realized that she almost sort of had him. And what takes place after that is an incredibly violent murder. I mean, he tries to cut out her heart. It ends up looking more like an upside down cross. He cuts out her eyes. He gouges out her eyes. It's this insane overkill. And at the time, investigators are like, okay, this is a crazy murder. Is this the same person? Because his MO has changed so drastically.
Well, because he's using all kinds of different weapons. He's using guns, he's stabbing, so it's hard to kind of like pinpoint everything. Because he does have a bit of an MO in terms of like him liking to, if there's a man, he will tie up the man, or like shoot the man. Sorry, he'll shoot the man and then he'll usually tie up and rape the woman. Or if there's children, he'll also tie up the children. And then he was said to like, if they were cooperative, he'd let the women live after he'd raped them. But in many cases, if they weren't, he'd kill them. And so you kind of have this being able to tie these together. And he'd also sometimes like do the pentagram on the wall and to be able to link it back.
Or with lipstick, he would write it on, on the bodies or on the walls. It's incredibly unsettling. Now, between March and August, he would commit 8 more murders. But there were also some cases where he would go in, probably thinking that he would be murdering someone that night or robbing, and it would just end in an assault, just a really brutal beating. One of the cases that stuck out to me that sort of speaks to his strange religious sensibilities was when he broke into a woman's house and he was beating her, and he was looking for stuff in the house, and then he got a phone cord and he started strangling her. And the phone cord sparked. And also he wasn't able to find a knife in the house to kill her. And he felt that it was Jesus that was saving her life, that he wasn't meant to kill this person, so he just left her, and she was, had to receive over 150 stitches, but she ended up surviving. And so we see that some people say that his whole ploy of Satanism was just a tactic to try and seem crazy at trial, which I don't believe. I think he truly believed in the forces of good and evil in his warped, twisted way.
I think so too. I think you see kind of like him having, he's sleeping in the cemetery to drawing the pentagrams to him just thinking that he's like kind of like this body and doer for the things of Satan. I think that's something he actually truly did believe, and his family coming from a religious, a Christian and Catholic upbringing, that's him just kind of like going against the grain of his family, and who he clearly had a lot of disdain for, like his father, I'm sure, and his cousin, even though he may not have realized it. I feel like he maybe internalized that into the Satanism that he was, interested in.
So they start getting a description on him as there are survivors at certain crime scenes. They start being able to composite certain things. They start being able to lift fingerprints and identifying that it is the same killer. He gets sloppy. Now he does commit these crimes with very cheap gardening gloves, but sometimes he'll take them off. He isn't as, he was very detailed when he would steal cars. He was good to wipe all the prints off. But when it comes to a crime scene where you see that he is acting out these fantasies, that he is totally unhinged at these crime scenes, he's less careful. So I don't think that at that time especially he was prepared for how damning forensic evidence and how detailed forensic evidence could be when it came to tying someone to a crime. So he leaves behind a trail of evidence, but what was some of the initial very damning evidence or testimony that led him to authorities?
Well, you have the shoe print. There was a special kind of shoe that he had, and there was said to be only one person who had purchased it in the greater Los Angeles area. And then eventually, when he goes to murder in San Francisco, they accidentally leak that information to the public, and he throws the shoe off of like the Golden Gate Bridge and into the water. And then the linchpin kind of is a little boy. He tries to break into this house, and a little boy sees him, and he eventually like leaves, but he gets the license plate, and it's in this car that they are able to find a thumbprint that is able to like ID him, and that's when you see kind of later on when you see when they get his picture everywhere, and you see the angry mob kind of coming after him in kind of like a very Beauty and the Beast-esque way.
He had a criminal history. They had mugshots. They had
the car theft.
His car theft. They knew Richard Ramirez was not new to the criminal justice system, and it was just sort of his carelessness, but also the carefulness of now, California was on guard. Like this boy knew this is something strange. He ran out and was able to get that license plate. Also that he spoke to a victim and identified himself as the Night Stalker after, I believe, the Los Angeles Times had already named him. So he didn't name himself. And there was a Night Stalker before Richard Ramirez that is perhaps a subject for another episode. And people were on guard and they were able to identify him. And this would lead to one of the craziest captures. It deals with an angry mob.
Screaming Matador.
Screaming El Matador. We're gonna tell you all about it in part 3, along with the trial, his conviction, and love behind bars. Stay with us in part 3.